The ring box felt heavier than it should have in my jacket pocket as I watched Helena Trenwall's mother, Veda Talrin, swirl her Bordeaux with the practiced dismissal of someone who'd been judging people her entire life. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversations and clinking silverware, the kind of upscale place where proposals were supposed to happen according to some unwritten social contract. Really, darling, Veda sighed, her voice carrying that particular brand of disappointment reserved for discussing failed investments. She could do so much better than you. I felt the words hit like a physical blow, but what came next was worse. Helena, my girlfriend of 3 years, the woman I'd been planning to spend my life with, didn't rush to defend me. Instead, she giggled, actually giggled, and squeezed her mother's hand in what looked like agreement. The moment stretched between us like a chasm opening in the earth. The ring box seemed to burn through my pocket. Around us, other diners continued their meals, oblivious to the small devastation unfolding at table 12. "You know what?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I stood up. "You're absolutely right." Both women looked up at me with matching expressions of surprise. Helena's perfectly manicured eyebrows rose slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to actually respond. "Finn, sit down," Helena said, her tone carrying the same condescending patience she used when explaining art to people she considered beneath her cultural understanding. "Mother didn't mean—" "Oh, she meant it," I interrupted, pulling out my wallet. "And apparently, so did you." I dropped enough cash on the table to cover our meals and the wine Veda had insisted on ordering, the expensive bottle naturally since I was paying. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was funding my own humiliation. "Where are you going?" Helena asked, her voice rising slightly. A few nearby diners glanced over with the polite curiosity of people witnessing someone else's drama. "To make sure you can do better," I said, turning away from the table. I walked out of Romano's with my dignity intact and my future completely rewritten. The Chicago evening air hit my face like a wake-up call I'd been needing for months, maybe years. Behind me, I could hear Helena calling my name, but I didn't turn around. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for exactly 30 seconds, letting the reality of what had just happened settle over me. Then I pulled out my phone and called the first locksmith I could find on Google. "Emergency rekey service," the voice answered. "How can I help you?" "I need my locks changed tonight," I said. "All of them. How much?" "Emergency service runs $180 plus parts. Address?" I gave him my information, started the car, and drove home to my Lincoln Park apartment, the one Helena had been living in rent-free for the past 18 months, while she established her art consulting business. The same business that seemed to consist mainly of attending gallery openings and posting Instagram photos of herself, looking contemplative next to expensive paintings. The locksmith, a tired-looking guy named Pete, arrived at 11:47 p.m. with a toolkit that had seen better days and the weary professionalism of someone who'd handled plenty of relationship disasters. "Girlfriend?" he asked as he worked on the front entrance. "Ex-girlfriend," I corrected. "Smart man," Pete said, not looking up from the lock mechanism. "Most guys wait too long to make that call." While Pete worked, I started the therapeutic process of packing Helena's belongings. 3 years of shared living space, and I was amazed by how much stuff she'd accumulated. Designer clothes filled 2 closets. Expensive skincare products crowded the bathroom counter. Art books stacked everywhere, most of them still pristine because Helena preferred talking about art to actually studying it. I packed methodically, dividing everything by category. Clothes in the large boxes, books in the smaller ones, personal items wrapped carefully in tissue paper. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger would come later. Right now, I felt the strange clarity that comes with finally seeing a situation for what it really is. The last item I packed was a framed portrait of Veda that Helena kept on the bedroom dresser. Even in the photograph, her mother managed to look disapproving. I wrapped it carefully and placed it in the final box, face down. By 2:30 a.m., Pete had finished with the locks and I'd finished with the packing. 14 boxes total, plus 3 suitcases I'd pulled from the closet. Everything Helena owned, neatly organized and ready for transport. I carried everything to the front porch, arranging the boxes on the lawn where they'd be visible from the street. Then I wrote a note on my laptop, printed it out, and taped it to the door. Go do better. The next evening, I watched from my living room window as Helena's Audi pulled into the driveway at 6:15 p.m. She sat in the car for a full minute, staring at the boxes, probably trying to process what she was seeing. When she finally got out and approached the door, I could see her confusion transform into disbelief, then anger. She tried her key twice before the reality hit her. Then she started calling my phone. I let it go to voicemail. All 7 calls. From my window, I watched her load the boxes into her car with the kind of frantic energy that comes with public embarrassment. A few neighbors had come out to watch, drawn by the spectacle of someone's life being redistributed across a front lawn. Helena knocked on the door, rang the doorbell, even tried calling up to my window. I stayed inside, reading a book, and occasionally glancing out to monitor her progress. By 8:30, she'd loaded the last box and driven away. Only then did I listen to her voicemails. Finn, this is ridiculous. Call me back. I don't understand what you're trying to prove here. My mother was just being protective. You know how she is. This is childish. We need to talk about this like adults. Fine, I'll stay at Mother's tonight, but we're discussing this tomorrow. I can't believe you're being this petty over nothing. Call me. I saved the messages, not out of sentiment, but because something in Helena's tone, the assumption that this was temporary, that I'd come around, told me this story wasn't over. 3 days of silence stretched between us before I decided to dig deeper. Helena's sudden departure had left behind more than just empty closet space. It had left questions. Why had she seemed so unsurprised by her mother's comment? Why hadn't she defended me or even looked embarrassed by Veda's rudeness? The first clue came when I was cleaning out the desk we'd shared. Tucked behind a stack of art magazines, I found a folder labeled Financial Planning in Helena's precise handwriting. Inside were documents I'd never seen before: credit applications, loan paperwork, bank statements for accounts I didn't recognize. My name was on half of them. I spread the papers across my kitchen table and started reading. Joint credit card applications dated 6 months ago. A personal loan application for $94,000, signed with my name in handwriting that looked almost exactly like mine, but not quite. Bank routing information for transfers I'd never authorized. My hands started shaking as the scope of what I was seeing became clear. This wasn't just about a cruel comment at dinner. This was about money. A lot of money. I called my attorney, Ron Donnelly, a guy I'd used for business contracts who had the kind of dry humor that made legal problems almost bearable. Finn, Ron said when I explained the situation, please tell me you're calling from somewhere with good cell reception because I think I'm having trouble hearing you correctly. Did you just say your girlfriend forged your signature on a $94,000 loan? Ex-girlfriend, I corrected. And yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Well, Ron said after a pause, that's a felony. Several felonies, actually. You want to press charges? I want to understand what happened first. Can you look into this? I can do better than that. I can have a forensic accountant trace every penny. Give me 48 hours. While Ron worked his magic, I did some investigating of my own. Helena's laptop was still connected to our shared Wi-Fi network, and she'd never changed her passwords. A few clicks later, I was looking at her email history. What I found made my stomach turn. Months of correspondence between Helena and her mother, dating back to before we'd even started talking about moving in together. Subject lines like timeline update and financial assessment and uncle status. Uncle status. They'd been tracking my Uncle Robert's health. I opened the most recent email chain and started reading from vitalrenagmail.com. 2. htrenwallegmail.com. Subject: Timeline adjustment. Darling, the inheritance timeline may be longer than we anticipated. Robert's latest health reports show improvement. We may need to extend the engagement period. How is F responding to the therapy suggestions? From htrenwallegmail.com to vitalrenagmail.com. Subject: RE, timeline adjustment. He's being stubborn about the medication. Dr. Martinez thinks we can work around his paranoid tendencies, but it's slow going. The financial documentation is almost complete. Should have access to the main accounts within the month. From vitalrenagmail.com to htrenwallegmail.com. Subject: RE, timeline adjustment. Good. The boutique situation is becoming urgent. We'll need those funds transferred before the quarterly review. Make sure F doesn't see any of the paperwork. I sat back in my chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. They weren't just talking about money, they were talking about me like I was a mark in a long con. The therapy sessions Helena had suggested, the couples counselor who'd recommended medication for my trust issues, even the timeline of our relationship, all of it had been orchestrated. My phone buzzed with a text from Ron. Found something. Can you come to my office? An hour later, I was sitting across from Ron's desk while he laid out a paper trail that read like a crime novel. Bank records, signature analyses, financial transfers, all of it pointing to a systematic theft operation that had been running for almost 2 years. Here's what happened, Ron said, adjusting his glasses. Your girlfriend and her mother identified you as a target sometime in early 2022. Veda's boutique business was failing. She'd been bleeding money for months and was facing bankruptcy. They researched your financial situation, your family connections, your inheritance prospects. He slid a document across the desk. This is where it gets interesting. Veda didn't just stumble across Helena's relationship with you. She arranged it. There's a paper trail showing payments to a private investigator who provided detailed reports on your habits, your favorite places, your social connections. They stalked me? Professionally stalked you. Then Veda positioned Helena to accidentally meet you at that gallery opening. Remember how she just happened to be standing next to the painting you were looking at? I did remember. It had seemed like fate at the time. Helena, beautiful and sophisticated, sharing my interest in contemporary art. We'd talked for hours that night, and I'd felt like I'd met someone who really understood me. The loan documents are forgeries, Ron continued. Good ones, but not perfect. The signature analysis shows clear differences in pressure patterns and letter formation. But here's the clever part. They didn't steal the money directly. They funneled it through legitimate business expenses, consulting fees, and investment opportunities. On paper, it looks like you were helping finance your girlfriend's mother's business ventures. How much? Total? About $180,000 over 18 months. The big loan, plus smaller transfers, credit card advances, and something called emergency family assistance that you apparently authorized during Veda's father's medical crisis. Veda's father has been gone for 10 years. I know. I checked the obituaries. Ron leaned back in his chair and studied my face. The good news is that most of this is recoverable. Fraud voids the loan obligations, and we can trace the transferred funds. The bad news is that it's going to get messy. These women put a lot of effort into this operation. I thought about Helena's tears during our therapy sessions, her concern about my paranoid behavior, her gentle suggestions that I might benefit from medication to help with my trust issues. Even the therapist had been part of it, not knowingly maybe, but Helena had fed her a carefully constructed narrative that painted me as the problem in our relationship. There's something else, Ron said, pulling out another folder. I had my investigator look into Veda's background. This isn't her first time running this kind of operation. There are at least 2 other men in the past 5 years who filed similar complaints, though neither of them pressed charges. Why not? Embarrassment, mostly. It's hard to admit you were conned by someone you loved. Plus, Veda's smart about targeting men who value their privacy. Successful guys who don't want their business spread around town. I stared at the documents spread across Ron's desk, feeling the last pieces of my relationship with Helena crumble into dust. Every memory was now suspect. Every intimate moment, every shared laugh, every time she'd told me she loved me, all of it potentially calculated. "What do you want to do?" Ron asked. I thought about Helena's voicemails, her assumption that this was just a temporary fight over her mother's rudeness. I thought about Veda's satisfied smile at the restaurant, the way she'd delivered her verdict about my inadequacy with such casual cruelty. "I want them to face consequences," I said. "All of them." "Legal consequences or social consequences?" "Both." Ron smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Now, we're talking my language. The plan we developed over the next week was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than going straight to criminal charges, which could take months to process and might result in plea bargains that let Helena and Veda off easy, we decided to attack their reputations first. In Chicago's social circles, reputation was everything, and Veda had spent decades building hers. "The key," Ron explained, "is documentation. We need to make sure everything we do is legal, ethical, and absolutely devastating." Step 1 was recovering the forged loan. Ron's forensic accountant had traced the money through 3 different accounts before it landed in Veda's business. The bank, faced with clear evidence of fraud, was eager to cooperate. They froze the accounts, initiated a fraud investigation, and sent official notices to both Helena and Veda demanding immediate repayment. Step 2 was more personal. I'd always known that Veda's social status came from her involvement in Chicago's charity circuit. She served on the boards of 3 major organizations, chaired 2 annual galas, and had her name on a wing of the Children's Hospital. Her reputation for philanthropic leadership was the foundation of her social power. Ron's investigator had done his homework. He'd identified the key people in Veda's social network, the board chairs and major donors who kept her world spinning. More importantly, he'd found their contact information. "We're not going to destroy her," Ron said as we prepared the evidence packages. "We're going to let her destroy herself. All we're doing is providing information to people who have a legitimate interest in knowing about the character of their board members." Each package contained copies of the forged documents, bank records showing the fraudulent transfers, and a timeline of the operation. Nothing inflammatory, nothing emotional, just facts, presented with the kind of professional detachment that made them impossible to dismiss. I hand-delivered the first package to Margaret Thornfield, the chair of the hospital board where Veda served as vice chair. Margaret was old Chicago money, the kind of woman who'd seen every type of scandal and social climber over her 73 years. "Mr. Harlow," she said, inviting me into her Lincoln Park mansion, "I understand you have some concerns about Ms. Talrin." I laid out the evidence methodically, watching Margaret's expression grow colder with each document. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and studied me with sharp blue eyes. "This is quite serious," she said finally. "If these allegations are accurate, Ms. Talrin has violated our ethics policies in several ways. We'll need to conduct a formal review." "I understand. I'm not asking you to take any specific action. I just thought the board should have complete information about its members." Margaret smiled, the first genuinely warm expression I'd seen from her. "Young man, you've handled this very professionally. Most people in your situation would be shouting accusations and making threats. This approach is far more effective." 2 days later, Veda received a letter requesting her resignation from the hospital board, pending a review of her recent financial activities. The same day, the Children's Charity and the Arts Foundation sent similar letters. But the real satisfaction came from an unexpected source. Helena's college roommate, Mira Kelren, reached out to me through LinkedIn. Her message was short and to the point. We need to talk. I have information you need to hear. We met at a coffee shop in River North, far from the neighborhoods where Helena or Veda might show up. Mira looked nervous, constantly checking her phone and glancing around the room. I should have said something sooner, she began. But Helena's been my friend since college, and I thought maybe she'd grown out of it. Grown out of what? The games. The manipulation. She's been doing this since we were 19, Finn. Maybe not on this scale, but she's always been looking for guys who could provide for her. She used to call it strategic dating. Mira pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages between her and Helena, dating back almost 3 years. Helena. Met someone interesting at the gallery tonight. Software guy, owns his own company. Mira. Cute? Helena. Cute enough. More importantly, he's got money and no family drama. Plus, Mom ran a background check. There's an inheritance coming. Mira. Jesus, Helena. Do you ever just date someone because you like them? Helena. I like financial security. This one could be the retirement plan. I stared at the messages, feeling a mixture of anger and relief. Anger at being reduced to a retirement plan, but relief at finally understanding what I'd been dealing with. There's more, Mira said, scrolling through the conversation history. She talked about it constantly. The therapy sessions, the medication suggestions, even the timeline for getting access to your accounts. She treated it like a job. Why are you telling me this now? Mira looked uncomfortable. Because Veda promised me a finder's fee if the plan worked out. $10,000 for introducing Helena to the right social connections. I took the money, Finn. I helped them, and I've been feeling terrible about it ever since. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is the $10,000 plus interest. I know it doesn't make up for what they did, but I want to make it right. I pushed the envelope back toward her. Keep the money, but I need you to do something else for me. What? I need you to record a conversation with Helena, get her to admit what she did. Can you do that? Mira nodded slowly. She's been calling me constantly since you kicked her out. She's desperate to understand how you found out so quickly. Yeah, I can get her talking. 3 days later, Mira sent me an audio file that was better than anything I could have hoped for. 23 minutes of Helena explaining her strategy, complaining about my paranoid behavior, and detailing exactly how she and her mother had planned to access my inheritance when Uncle Robert passed away. The best part came near the end, when Helena started talking about her backup plan. If Finn doesn't come around soon, I might have to cut my losses, Helena's voice said through my laptop speakers. Derek's been texting me again, and his wife is finally talking about filing for divorce. His real estate portfolio is worth more than Finn's tech company anyway. Derek. I'd heard Helena mention him before, an old friend from college who'd married into money and spent his time flipping luxury properties. Apparently Helena had been keeping her options open. I saved the audio file and sent a copy to Ron. Then I started planning phase 2 of my response. Because if Helena thought she could move on to her next target without consequences, she was about to learn otherwise. Derek Sloan wasn't hard to find. Helena had tagged him in enough Instagram posts over the years that I had a clear picture of his habits, his favorite restaurants, and most importantly, his pride and joy. A pristine 1967 Shelby Cobra that he parked in the same spot at his gym every morning at 6 a.m. I'm not a violent person by nature, but I am an engineer, and engineers solve problems with the tools available. In this case, the tools were a gallon of fish oil from a restaurant supply store, 2 cans of bright pink spray paint, and a detailed knowledge of Derek's schedule. The gym parking lot was mostly empty at 5:45 a.m. when I arrived. Derek's Cobra sat in its usual spot, gleaming under the parking lot lights like a $60,000 middle-aged crisis. I'd done my research. The car was Derek's most prized possession, the thing he posted about on social media more than his own children. I worked quickly and methodically. The fish oil went under the car first, creating a spreading puddle that would soak into the concrete and smell for weeks. Then I used the spray paint to write cheater across the windshield and Helena's toy along the driver's side door. The piece de resistance was a note I tucked under the windshield wiper. She's using you too. Ask her about the retirement plan. A friend. I was back in my car and pulling out of the parking lot when Derek arrived for his morning workout. In my rearview mirror, I watched him discover my handiwork. Even from a distance, I could see his body language change from casual confidence to rage-filled disbelief. He called the police, of course. But vandalism cases in Chicago get about 30 seconds of attention unless someone gets hurt, and I'd been careful not to cause any permanent damage. The paint would wash off, the oil would eventually fade, and Derek would be left with nothing but a story about some anonymous enemy who knew about his affair with Helena. The real payoff came 2 hours later, when Derek called Helena in a panic. I know this because Mira was with Helena when the call came in, and she recorded the entire conversation. Someone knows about us. Derek's voice crackled through Helena's speakerphone. They vandalized my car with your name on it. What do you mean, my name? They wrote Helena's toy on my car, Helena, and they left a note about some retirement plan. What the hell is a retirement plan? There was a long pause before Helena responded. It's nothing, just someone's trying to cause trouble. Nothing? My car is covered in paint and fish oil and you're calling it nothing? My wife drives by this gym, Helena. What if she'd seen it? Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you started texting me again. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Derek demanding answers and Helena deflecting blame. By the end of the call, they were both angry, both scared, and both starting to realize that their secret relationship wasn't as secret as they'd thought. But I wasn't done with Derek yet. 2 days later, I followed him to his office, a glass tower in the Loop where his real estate development company occupied the 15th floor. Derek had a routine. Lunch at the same restaurant every Wednesday, always parking in the same underground garage, always taking the same elevator to street level. I intercepted him at the elevator. "Derek Sloan," I said, stepping into the elevator as the doors closed. "We need to talk." Derek was a big guy, 6'2", probably played football in college, but he looked nervous when he realized we were alone in a confined space. "Do I know you?" "Finn Harlow, Helena's ex-boyfriend, though I guess you knew her first, didn't you?" The color drained from Derek's face. "Look, I don't know what Helena told you, but she didn't tell me anything," I interrupted. "She didn't have to. I found out about your little arrangement on my own." The elevator reached the ground floor, but I pressed the button for the parking garage. Derek watched the numbers change with growing panic. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something," I said as the elevator descended. "Helena isn't just cheating on me with you. She's running a con game, and you're about to become her next mark. That retirement plan she mentioned, it's not a joke. It's her business model." The elevator doors opened to the parking garage. I stepped out, but Derek stayed inside. "She's been stealing from me for 2 years," I continued. "Forged documents, fake loans, identity theft, and now that I've cut her off, she's going to need a new source of income. Guess who's next?" Derek's hand hovered over the elevator buttons. "You're lying." "Am I? Ask her about the $94,000 loan she took out in my name. Ask her about her mother's boutique business and where the funding came from. Ask her why she's been tracking my uncle's health records." I pulled out my phone and played a snippet of the recorded conversation between Helena and Mira, just enough to let Derek hear Helena's voice saying, "Derek's real estate portfolio is worth more than Finn's tech company anyway." Derek's face went white. "How did you—" "She's playing both of us, Derek. The difference is, I figured it out before I lost everything. You still have time to protect yourself." The elevator doors started to close, but Derek stuck his hand out to stop them. "What are you going to do?" "Me? Nothing. I'm done with Helena. But you might want to ask yourself why she's suddenly so interested in reconciling with a married man whose wife is talking about divorce. And you might want to check your credit reports, just to be safe." I walked away, leaving Derek standing in the elevator with a lot of uncomfortable questions to consider. That evening, Helena called me for the first time since I'd changed the locks. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened to the message immediately. Finn, we need to talk. I know you're angry, but you're making a mistake. Derek told me about your conversation, and you're misunderstanding the situation. I can explain everything if you'll just call me back, please. Her voice sounded different, less confident, more desperate. The controlled manipulation was gone, replaced by genuine panic. I didn't call her back. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Ron, along with the recording of Derek's parking lot meltdown and a detailed timeline of my interactions with both of them. You're playing a dangerous game, Ron warned me during our next meeting. Harassment charges, stalking allegations. They could flip this around on you if you're not careful. Everything I've done has been legal, I said. I haven't threatened anyone, I haven't damaged any property permanently, and I haven't made any false statements. I'm just making sure the right people have the right information. Ron smiled. You're learning to think like a lawyer. That's either very good or very bad for your soul. My soul will survive. I'm not sure Helena's reputation will. As it turned out, I was right about that. The social destruction of Veda Talrin happened faster than I'd anticipated. Chicago's high society operates on a delicate ecosystem of trust, reputation, and mutual benefit. When that system is disrupted, the correction can be swift and merciless. Within a week of my evidence packages reaching the right people, Veda had been asked to resign from all 3 charity boards. The hospital board was the first to act, citing financial irregularities that compromise our ethical standards. The children's charity followed 2 days later, and the Arts Foundation made it unanimous by the end of the week. But the real damage came from the social ripple effects. Margaret Thornfield, the hospital board chair, had lunch with Patricia Kendall, who chaired the city's most exclusive gala committee. Patricia mentioned Veda's difficulties to Caroline Ashworth, who ran the charity auction circuit. Within days, Veda's name had been quietly removed from invitation lists across the city. I learned about this through an unexpected source, Helena's desperate phone call to Mira, which Mira recorded and sent to me. It's a complete disaster, Helena's voice trembled through my laptop speakers. Mother can't show her face anywhere. The Pemberton Gala uninvited her yesterday, and the Thornfield Christmas party sent back her RSVP with a note saying they were at capacity. We're being blacklisted. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to commit fraud, Mira's voice responded, with a coldness I hadn't heard from her before. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Finn was supposed to be reasonable. We would have paid him back eventually. With what money? Your mother's boutique is bankrupt, and you've never had a real job in your life. There was a long pause before Helena responded. Derek might help us. His divorce is almost final, and he's got liquidity from the property sales. Helena, Derek's not going to help you. His wife hired a private investigator. She knows about the affair, and she's using it in the divorce proceedings. He's about to lose half his assets. I sat back in my chair, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. The web of deception that Helena and Veda had built was collapsing under its own weight, taking down everyone who'd been part of their schemes. But the most satisfying moment came 3 days later, when I received an unexpected visitor at my office. I was working late, trying to catch up on the software development projects I'd been neglecting during my personal drama, when the receptionist buzzed me. Mr. Harlow? There's a woman here to see you. She says her name is Helena Trenwall. I almost told the receptionist to send her away, but curiosity got the better of me. Send her up. Helena looked different when she walked into my office. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wasn't wearing the expensive makeup that had always made her look like she was posing for a magazine cover. Thank you for seeing me, she said, sitting down across from my desk without being invited. I figured you'd run out of other options. She flinched at that but pressed on. I want to apologize. What we did was wrong, and I know you have every right to be angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, Helena. You stole from me for 2 years. You manipulated me, lied to me, and treated our entire relationship like a business transaction. It wasn't all fake, she said quickly. I did care about you. I do care about you. Really? Which part was real? The part where you tracked my uncle's health records, or the part where you forged my signature on loan documents? Helena's composure started to crack. We were desperate, Finn. Mother's business was failing, and we didn't know what else to do. You could have gotten jobs. You could have asked for help honestly. You could have done literally anything other than commit multiple felonies. I know that now, but it's too late to change what happened. The question is, what happens next? I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. Even now, even after everything that had happened, Helena was still trying to manipulate the situation. She was here because she needed something from me, not because she was genuinely sorry. What happens next is that you face the consequences of your choices, I said. The bank is pursuing criminal charges for the loan fraud. The IRS is investigating the money transfers, and your social circle has figured out what kind of person you really are. The bank said they might consider dropping the charges if you agreed to a settlement. I'm not interested in a settlement. Helena's mask finally slipped completely. Fine. You want to destroy us? Congratulations. You've succeeded. Mother's lost everything she worked for her entire life. I can't get a job anywhere in the city because word has gotten around about what happened. Derek won't return my calls because his wife is threatening to take his children if he has any contact with me. You've won, Finn. Is that what you wanted to hear? What I wanted was to marry someone who loved me, I said quietly. What I got was a con artist who saw me as a retirement plan. So no, Helena, this isn't about winning. This is about justice. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You're making a mistake. There are things you don't know, things that could come out if this goes to trial. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to protect you. Do you really want everyone to know about your family's financial situation? Your uncle's will? The inheritance you're expecting? I almost laughed. Helena, you seem to be confused about something. I don't care who knows about my family's money. I'm not ashamed of being successful, and I'm not afraid of people knowing I have wealthy relatives. The only person who should be worried about public exposure is you. Helena stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to figure out if I was bluffing. When she realized I wasn't, her shoulders sagged in defeat. This isn't over, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. Yes, it is, I replied. It's been over since the moment you chose to steal from me instead of being honest about your problems. Everything that's happened since then has just been the consequences catching up. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, watching the Chicago skyline through my window. The lights of the city stretched out below me, millions of people living their lives, making their choices, dealing with their own consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Ron. Bank called. Helena and Veda want to meet about a plea agreement. You interested? I typed back, only if it includes full restitution, public acknowledgement of the fraud, and community service. No jail time, but no easy way out either. I'll set it up. As I packed up my things and prepared to leave the office, I realized that for the first time in months, I felt genuinely at peace. The anger was gone, replaced by something cleaner and more sustainable. Closure. Helena had been right about one thing. This wasn't over yet, but the ending was no longer in doubt. The meeting took place in Ron's conference room on a gray Thursday morning in November. Helena and Veda sat on one side of the polished table with their attorney, a nervous-looking man named Peterson who kept shuffling through papers like he was looking for a way out of the situation. Ron and I sat across from them with the bank's representative, a sharp-eyed woman named Collins, positioned at the head of the table. Veda looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past month. The carefully maintained appearance of wealth and sophistication had been replaced by the haggard look of someone whose world had collapsed. Helena sat beside her mother, staring at her hands and avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. "Let's get straight to the point," Collins began. "My client is prepared to pursue criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. The evidence is overwhelming, and the potential penalties are severe. However, Mr. Harlow has indicated he might be willing to consider an alternative resolution." Peterson cleared his throat. "My clients are prepared to make full restitution for any financial damages. We're hoping to resolve this matter without the need for criminal proceedings." "Full restitution is the starting point," Ron said, sliding a document across the table. "But given the scope of the deception and the damage to my client's reputation and emotional well-being, we're looking for something more comprehensive." I watched Helena's face as Ron outlined our terms. Complete repayment of all stolen funds, plus interest and legal fees. A written confession detailing the scope of their operation. Public acknowledgement of their actions through a statement to be published in the Chicago Tribune. And 500 hours of community service for both women. "This is excessive," Peterson protested. "My clients made a mistake, but they're not criminals." "Your clients committed multiple felonies over a period of 2 years," Ron replied calmly. "They forged documents, stole money, and operated an elaborate fraud scheme. The only reason we're having this conversation instead of meeting in criminal court is because Mr. Harlow is more interested in justice than revenge." Veda spoke for the first time since entering the room. "You're trying to destroy our lives over money that we fully intended to repay." I looked at her directly. "Mrs. Talrin, you tracked my uncle's health records so you could time your theft to coincide with my inheritance. You positioned your daughter to manipulate me into a relationship based on lies. You forged my signature on legal documents and stole nearly $200,000 from me. This isn't about money. It's about the fact that you treated me like a mark in a con game." "We never meant for it to go this far," Helena said quietly, speaking for the first time. "It started small, just borrowing against future income. But then Mother's business got worse, and we needed more time." "You had 2 years to tell me the truth," I replied. "Instead, you doubled down. You sent me to therapy to convince me I was paranoid. You suggested medication to make me more compliant. You planned to marry me so you could access my inheritance when my uncle passed away. At what point in that timeline did you plan to repay me?" Helena didn't have an answer for that. Collins laid out the timeline for accepting the plea agreement. 48 hours to decide, with the understanding that rejection would result in immediate criminal charges. As the meeting broke up, Helena lingered behind while her mother and attorney left the room. "I know you don't believe me," she said, "but I did love you. Maybe not at first, but somewhere along the way it became real." "If that's true," I said, "then you had plenty of opportunities to come clean. Love doesn't justify theft, Helena. It doesn't excuse manipulation. And it doesn't make any of this acceptable." She nodded slowly, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I know. I just wanted you to know that not everything was fake. The problem is, I'll never know which parts were real and which parts were performance. You made sure of that." 2 days later, Ron called with their decision. Helena and Veda had accepted the plea agreement. Full restitution would be paid within 60 days. The confession would be signed and notarized, and the public statement would run in the Tribune the following Sunday. "There's one more thing," Ron said. "Helena wanted me to give you this." He handed me an envelope with my name written in Helena's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short note. "Finn, I know this doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to have the truth about one thing. The night you proposed, I was going to tell you everything. I'd decided I couldn't go through with the plan anymore. But then Mother started talking, and I lost my nerve. I chose the easy path instead of the right one, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I hope you find someone who deserves you. Helena." I read the note twice, then folded it and put it in my desk drawer. Maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. At this point, it didn't matter. The only truth that mattered was that Helena had made her choice, and now she was living with the consequences. The Tribune article ran the following Sunday, buried on page 6 of the business section under the headline, "Local Women Admit to Fraud Scheme." It was brief and factual, outlining the basic details of their operation without naming me as the victim. Most people probably skipped right over it. But in Chicago's social circles, the story spread like wildfire. Within days, everyone who mattered knew exactly what Veda and Helena had done, and to whom. The final destruction of their reputations was swift and complete. I learned about the aftermath through Margaret Thornfield, who called me a week after the article appeared. "I thought you should know," she said. "Veda and her daughter have left Chicago. Apparently they're moving to Phoenix to live with Veda's sister. It seems they found the social climate here a bit chilly." "I can imagine. You handled this situation with remarkable restraint, Mr. Harlow. Many people would have sought a much harsher resolution." "I got what I wanted," I said. "Justice, restitution, and the truth. Everything else was just noise." 3 months later, I was cleaning out my desk when I found the engagement ring I'd planned to give Helena. I held it up to the light, watching it sparkle, remembering the hope and excitement I'd felt when I'd first bought it. Then I put it back in its box and locked it in my safe. Not as a memento of what I'd lost, but as a reminder of what I'd learned. That sometimes the best proposal is the one you don't make, and sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to show you who they really are. 6 months after that night at Romano's, I was sitting in my office when my Uncle Robert called. "Finn, I've got some news. The doctors say I'm in complete remission. Looks like I'm going to be around to bother you for a lot longer than anyone expected." I smiled, thinking about Helena and Veda's careful timeline calculations, their tracking of his health records, their plans built around his anticipated demise. "That's the best news I've heard all year, Uncle Robert." "Good, because I'm thinking of changing my will anyway. All this medical stuff has made me realize I want to see my money do some good while I'm still alive to enjoy it. I'm setting up a scholarship fund for engineering students. Figured you might want to help me run it." I'd be honored. After I hung up, I walked to my office window and looked out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Helena and Veda were starting over in Phoenix, trying to rebuild their lives after the collapse of their carefully constructed world. Derek was probably dealing with his divorce and the destruction of his real estate empire, and I was here, successful, vindicated, and finally free from the web of lies that had defined my life for 2 years. The ring was still in my safe, and it would probably stay there. But for the first time since that night at Romano's, I could imagine a future where I might need it again. This time for someone who deserved it, someone who would say yes because she loved me, not because she saw me as a retirement plan. That future felt like a gift worth waiting for.